cold metal bars gleamed under the flickering fluorescent lights of the small jailhouse. Erin sat on the hard bench, her heart racing as she stared at the wall in front of her. The room felt suffocatingly silent, each tick of the clock echoing like a drumbeat in her ears. She wrapped her arms around her knees, feeling the weight of her loneliness pressed down on her chest. Outside, life moved on without her, the sounds of laughter and the bustle of the town just beyond the walls seemingly mocking her solitude. Erin had never imagined she would end up here. Just a few days ago, she had been a waitress at a diner, dreaming of a life bigger than the small town she lived in. She had her plans, maybe attend classes, travel someday, find something more than herself. But a few bad choices had landed her behind bars, and the regret was a heavy fog that clouded her thoughts. The door creaked open, and a stout deputy walked in. He had a kind face with deep laugh lines around his eyes, but there was a firmness that commanded respect. Erin, as his name tag read, approached her slowly, his footsteps echoing in the empty space. As he sat across from her, his blue uniform contrasted sharply with the gray walls around them. He asked, his voice steady but gentle. Erin looked up, surprise flashing across her face. No one had shown genuine curiosity since her arrival. Most of the officers treated her like a number, an inconvenience, but here was this deputy, looking at her as though she mattered. I don't know, she stammered. I made a mistake. Erin raised an eyebrow, probing deeper. She hesitated, her tongue feeling thick in her mouth. I took something that wasn't mine, a couple of $100 from the register. I thought I could pay it back. His gaze softened. Erin nodded, tears pricking the corners of her eyes. I was desperate. I thought I could fix things. Tell me about this desperation, he pushed gently, leaning forward as if the weight of her words mattered to him. She breathed in deeply, the emotions bubbling to the surface. My dad lost his job a few months ago. My mom works 2 jobs now just to make ends meet. I wanted to help them. I thought if I could just borrow some money, it would be okay. Erin listened intently. That made her feel lighter, like a burden being lifted even just a little bit. You're a good kid, Erin, he said finally, but you need to own up to this. I know, she replied, her voice trembling. It's just, I don't know what's going to happen next. He leaned back slightly, assessing her. What if I told you that fear is just a part of life? For the first time that day, Erin gave a small smile. What do you mean fear just feels so? Fear can keep you from making bigger mistakes. It can motivate you to change. She thought about his words as silence filled the small office. It was quiet but burdened with potential. I never thought of it that way, she admitted, swallowing hard. You want it to go away, but it can't until you confront it, he replied calmly. You're here now, it's not the end of the world. A shiver ran down her spine. She wasn't ready to face the truth about herself, her choices, the reasons behind them. I don't even know what I want anymore, she whispered. Let's break it down. What do you like to do? Erin encouraged, leaning forward again, clearly invested. I used to love painting. I haven't picked up a brush in years, she admitted slowly, the thoughts cascading back like a forgotten melody. Then maybe that's your answer, he said. Art could help you. Even from here, you can express yourself. You know, art therapy is a real thing. Erin swallowed hard. But I'm locked up. True, but you can start within yourself, he said sharply. Think about what you want out of life. This is a chance to reflect. His words hit her deep. Could she really turn the pain of her situation into something beautiful? She had taken a step into darkness, but what if she could paint her way back to the light? Erin glanced down at her hands, still trembling. What if I fail again? Failing is part of the process, he said with conviction. You're young, you will stumble, but it's what you do after that matters most. Silence returned as she stared back at him, the realization slowly dawning that maybe, just maybe, there was a path forward. That fear could be transformed into something tangible, a canvas of her life waiting for the first stroke. She started but could not finish. That's the first step, Erin confirmed, a smile creeping across his face. Imagine yourself out there. What's the first thing you would do? I'd find a brush, she said, a sense of determination blossoming inside her. There you go. Hold on to that thought, he encouraged. Take this time to reflect and don't let this moment define you. As he stood up to leave, Erin felt both grateful and terrified. Would she be able to face the world beyond these walls? But in the depths of her heart, a flicker of hope was ignited, fed by Erin's kindness and belief in her. The days turned into weeks. Each day was a battle, as all the noises from the jailhouse, the clanging of metal, voices in the distance reminded her of where she was. But every time fear threatened to win, she remembered Erin's words echoing softly in her mind like a mantra. She kept a small notebook, filling it with thoughts and memories. She treated it like a sketchbook, weaving her pain into the lines of her writing. It wasn't painting, but it was art, and it felt like a freeing embrace as she poured out her soul onto the pages. She thought about her parents, how hard they had worked, and the sacrifices they made. She wanted to be more than just their daughter. She wanted to be someone they could be proud of. The thought stirred something in her. With every line, she began to heal, reflecting on her mistakes and her path forward. It wasn't easy, but it was proof to herself that she was more than a moment in time. When the day finally came and Erin walked through the gates into the sunlight, the weight on her shoulders felt lighter. She didn't look back at the jailhouse, but instead looked forward, the horizon stretching ahead. There was a world waiting for her, full of colors she hadn't yet painted. She found a community art center, and signs for classes brightened her path. With trembling hands, she signed up. Wouldn't be easy to create a life, but she would do it one brushstroke at a time. The fear remained, but it was now a tool she could use, a stepping stone that would help her navigate through this new world. And as she stepped into that first class, she felt more alive than she had in years. It wasn't just the colors that surrounded her, it was the realization that she could shape her future. She could become anything she wanted. From behind those cold metal bars, she had found light, and it would never fade again. The sound of the metal door slamming shut echoed through the dimly lit room, vibrating against the walls like a heartbeat. Inside, shadows danced under flickering fluorescent lights, illuminating the lone figure of Sarah, locked away in her tiny cell. Her heart raced, drowning out the faint noises of the patrol cars outside, their lights flashing like distant stars. She was alone, trapped in a world she never imagined she'd find herself in. Sarah sat on the cold bench, arms wrapped around her knees, trying to feel something other than the suffocating weight of despair. The memories of her choices rolled through her mind like relentless waves crashing against a rocky shore. Just days before, she had been celebrating her birthday with friends, laughing and dreaming about the future. Yet here she was arrested, isolated, and wondering how everything had unraveled so quickly. It was a stupid mistake, a moment of weakness. She had seen her best friend Lisa, struggling, drowning in debts and bad decisions. When the temptation to borrow a little money turned into a desperate act of theft, it felt like a quick fix. Now, sitting alone, Sarah realized that quick fixes rarely ended well. Her thoughts were interrupted when the heavy door creaked open again. The deputy strode in, his sharp uniform contrasting with the drab gray walls of the jailhouse. Deputy Nathan had a serious face, but there was a softness in his eyes that hinted at understanding. "Hey, Sarah," he said, his voice echoing softly in the confined space. "Sure," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. His question was direct, piercing through the fog of her shame. As she lifted her gaze, something shifted in the air. The weight of her situation pressed down on her, but the way he asked made it feel like she could breathe again, even just a little. "I messed up," she admitted, her voice trembling as she fought back tears. "I made a dumb choice to take money that wasn't mine. I thought it would help my friend. But that's not really what I'm asking," Nathan replied gently. The question hung in the air, creating a chasm between them, one filled with the weight of her unspoken truths. Sarah hesitated, digging into the core of her emotions, feeling every ounce of guilt press against her heart. "I don't know," she stuttered. "I guess I felt overwhelmed. Life was just too hard." He nodded slowly, seemingly absorbing her words. With a rush, memories flooded her mind, the late nights spent worrying about bills, the pressure of expectations, and the feeling of being trapped in a life that felt like it was spiraling out of control. Everything just felt impossible, she admitted. Nathan leaned forward, his eyes firmly locked onto hers. "You know, many people feel the weight of the world on their shoulders, but taking a shortcut like theft can send you down a darker path. But I didn't mean to hurt anyone," Sarah burst out, desperation leaking into her voice. "I just wanted to help. Sometimes wanting to help others blinds us to the risks," he countered softly. His words felt like a punch to the gut. Why hadn't she seen it before? It was true, in her attempt to be a hero in someone else's life, she had ruined her own. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she looked away. She whispered, the weight of uncertainty hanging heavily in the air. "Reflect on what truly matters to you," he suggested. "What do you want to achieve?" Her voice cracked with emotion. "I want to feel free. Maybe this is an opportunity," Nathan said, glancing around the small room as if searching for the right words. "To face those choices, to grow from them." Silence fell between them, enveloping Sarah like a heavy blanket. Here sat a man who understood the human condition, reflecting on the inevitability of mistakes and still encouraging hope. She asked, her voice heavy with doubt. "Start here," Nathan replied, leaning back as if weighing her options in the balance. "Write down your feelings, express what you want. Even in this space, you can begin to create a path forward." Sarah considered his words carefully. Writing had always been an escape for her, a way to unwind and process emotions. It felt like reigniting a flickering flame long forgot. "I used to love writing," she admitted, drawing in a deep breath, "but I put it aside." "Then pick it up again," Nathan urged. "Use this time to channel everything you're feeling into words." She questioned, her doubt creeping back in. "Let it be for you," he said firmly. "Even if no one else reads it, put your heart on the page." The idea struck her like a bolt of lightning. She hadn't thought about how to transform her experiences into something greater, something that might even inspire others. She wanted to find a way to make sense of the chaos inside her. She whispered, the hope beginning to grow. "Of course. First step is always the hardest. You're already on the right path for acknowledging your mistakes." In that moment, something shifted within her. The walls of her cell began to feel less like a prison and more like a sanctuary, a place where she could finally confront her reality and start again. "Okay," she said, determination filling her voice. "I'll write." Nathan smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling. "That's the spirit," he said, standing up. "Remember, it's never too late to turn things around." As he turned to leave, her heart raced with newfound excitement. She had a voice and a story worth telling. The echoes of her choices faded as she held onto the idea of transformation. The days that followed were filled with moments of vulnerability and clarity. Sarah spent every spare moment pouring her soul into the notebook, her feelings spilling across the pages with raw honesty. Her words danced with frustration, hope, and regret, each line a reflection of her journey. She wrote about her family, about Lisa, and the pressure of trying to be someone she was not. She wrote about the fear of failure, the weight of expectations, and the realization that it was okay not to have all the answers right now. Through her writing, she began to unearth the layers of herself she had hidden for so long. With every sentence, she felt lighter, as if the act of expressing herself released some of the burdens she had carried. The jailhouse, which once felt like a dark pit, now served as a cocoon. She was transforming. Then, the day finally came when she heard the bars clattering open for the last time. The familiar face of Deputy Nathan greeted her as she stepped out, feeling the sunlight flood over her like a warm embrace for the first time in what felt like forever. He asked, a spark of pride visible in his eyes. She nodded, holding her notebook tightly against her chest. As she took her first steps beyond the jailhouse, Sarah felt the weight of the past still trailing behind her, but she no longer felt defined by it. Instead, she was empowered by her story, the mistakes she had made, and the lessons she had learned. She turned to Nathan one last time. "Thank you for believing in me. Believe in yourself," he replied, his voice steady and genuine. With a determined turn, Sarah stepped into the world outside, ready to reclaim her life. She knew her past would always be a part of her, but now the future lay bright and open, waiting for her to paint it with her words, her feelings, and her journey of transformation. And she would be ready to share that story with the world, one powerful word at a time. The heavy clang of the metal door echoed through the small, stark room, the sound like a drum announcing a harsh reality. We find Emma sitting on the cold concrete bench of her jail cell, the starkness of her surroundings matching the turmoil inside her head. Just days before, she had been walking down a sunny street, full of life and hope, dreaming of a brighter future. Now she was locked away, consumed by dread and regret. Not long ago, life seemed simple. Emma had big dreams. She wanted to be an artist, to travel the world and capture beauty in every brushstroke. But a few poor choices led her down a slippery slope, culminating in that one night of desperation when she took money from her mother's purse, money meant for bills. As the reality of her actions settled in, she raged against herself for what she had done. Swaddled in guilt and shame, she felt like a ghost haunting her own life. The cell was silent except for the muffled sounds of the outside world. Cars honked in the distance, laughter drifted through the air, and freedom seemed so painfully close yet utterly unattainable. Emma pressed her fingers to the cool metal bars, wishing she could slip through them and escape into the life she once had. Or creaked open again, and in walked Deputy Cruz, a seasoned officer with a no-nonsense demeanor but a glimmer of empathy in his eyes. "Hey, Emma," her heart raced, talk about what? She felt too small in that moment, too ashamed to face anyone, but there was something in his gaze that pulled her attention. Reluctantly, she nodded. He asked, his voice steady but kind. Emma stared at him, unsure if she should just shrug off the question or be honest. "I made a mistake," she muttered. "I took money." He leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "But what led you to that mistake?" The question opened a floodgate of emotions. "I was desperate. My mom was stressed about bills, and I thought if I could just help her out, just for a little while." Deputy Cruz watched her intently. Desperation doesn't come from nowhere. Emma hesitated. She hadn't thought about this deeper perspective before. "I felt like I was drowning." Cruz nodded slowly, as if he understood her pain. A lot of people get caught in that feeling. They see the world closing in on them and feel helpless. To Emma, this was a revelation. No one had talked about the power of vulnerability like that. "I didn't know how," she admitted softly. "That's a heavy load for anyone," he said wisely. "It crushes you," she said, a knot forming in her throat. Cruz took a deep breath, as if weighing his next words. "Desperate people often make choices they wouldn't normally consider. In your case, it led to theft. But it can lead to much worse as well. It doesn't feel like a chance. It feels like a dead end," Emma replied, anger sparking within her again. "Maybe being stuck is what you need right now," he replied calmly. "Have you ever had a moment where you realized something significant about yourself?" She thought for a moment, images flashing through her mind, her first art show, the day she made a friend who understood her, and even the times she spent lost in her sketches. "Yeah, I once painted a mural for a community center. It was freeing." "Then maybe you can channel that feeling," Cruz suggested. "This experience doesn't have to define you. It's an opportunity to start over." Her heart raced at the prospect of a fresh start. "I'd focus on my art again." "Art therapy is a real thing," he encouraged. "You have a unique perspective." But doubt crept back in. "What if I can't?" "Failure is part of success," he stated, confidence ringing in his voice. "Every artist fails before they find their style." The glimmer of hope in those words ignited something deep inside her. "Start writing. Start drawing, even if it's just on scrap paper. Pour out your feelings, your fears, and your dreams. Create art from this moment," Deputy Cruz advised, leaning closer. The tension in Emma's chest began to lift. Writing had always been her escape, a way to untangle her thoughts and express herself. Absolutely. Use this time wisely, he said, the sincerity in his voice shining through. Turn this pain into something powerful. As the conversation wrapped up, Emma felt uncertain but excited. The idea of converting her feelings into art took hold in her mind like a wildflower bursting through cracks in concrete. She would give it a try. She had nothing to lose. Days turned into weeks as she began to pour her thoughts and emotions onto the page. The struggle was real, each word sometimes feeling like pulling teeth while others flowed freely, but she kept at it. Her notebook became a refuge, filled with sketches of the life she yearned for and passages that revealed her deepest fears and aspirations. In one drawing, she captured a desolate landscape, a representation of her feelings of hopelessness. But right next to it, she painted a vibrant sunrise breaking through the darkness, symbolizing hope and renewal. The contrast spoke volumes about her journey. As her days in the jailhouse passed, Deputy Cruz would check in, encouraging Emma along the way. He'd ask, genuine interest lighting up his eyes. "It's helping," she admitted. "Every time I draw or write, I feel a little more alive." "Good," he replied with a proud smile. "That's what I wanted for you." One day, Cruz handed her a small pack of colored pencils. "Thought you could use these," he said, and for the first time, she saw him as more than just a deputy. He was a guiding light in her darkness. With a grateful heart, she accepted the gift and immediately set to work. Each color blended with her emotions, pouring out intangibles onto the paper. She used her art to narrate everything: the pain, the sorrow, the dreams of freedom. And then came the day when Emma completed a piece that felt monumental. It wasn't just a drawing, it was a declaration of who she was becoming. She named it "Rising from Ashes," showcasing a phoenix igniting from flames, a symbol of rebirth. "Emma, this is incredible," Cruz said when she showed it to him. "I never thought I could express myself like this," she said, astonished at her own resilience. "You are becoming someone worth believing in," he replied, the warmth in his gaze filling her with gratitude. As her release date neared, so too did the anxiety of stepping back into the world. What if the darkness pulled her under again? Could she really maintain this sense of purpose? Cruz asked during one of their conversations. "I want to pursue art again. I want to go back to school and study therapy through art," she replied, excitement creeping into her voice. "Then that's your direction. Hold on to it." "Yes," she said, determination shining in her eyes. "I felt alive. Imagine that feeling guiding you as you walk into your new life. The end of this chapter doesn't have to mean the end of your journey," he encouraged. The day finally came when Emma stepped out of the jailhouse, the sun blinding her momentarily. The air felt different, electrifying, as if it carried the whispers of a new beginning. "Thank you for everything, Deputy Cruz," she said, holding her notebook tightly against her chest. "Just remember, you created this path. Keep creating." "Keep believing in yourself," he replied, a knowing smile playing on his lips. As she walked away, she felt a mixture of apprehension and exhilaration. The world ahead was vast and filled with unknowns, but for the first time she felt prepared to face it. She would reclaim her life one brushstroke at a time, and with every step she took, a vibrant canvas stretched out before her. Emma was ready to paint a future that resonated with the beauty of triumph, resilience, and the power of hope. No longer defined by her past, she stood tall, ready to write the next chapter of a life that she chose for herself. The journey had only just begun. The heavy sound of a metal door slamming echoed through the dimly lit corridor, a thunderous reminder of the reality she now faced. Emma sat alone on the cold bench of her jail cell, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest. Just a few days earlier, she had been a normal 21-year-old, grappling with the stress of work, relationships, and the weight of expectations. Now she was confined within these walls, surrounded by emptiness and despair. The circumstances that brought her to this point had spiraled out of control in what felt like a dizzying blur. Emma had always been the kind of person who wore her heart on her sleeve, striving to make everyone proud, including her family. Yet in her desperate attempt to help her mother pay off mounting bills, her decision had taken a dark turn. She had borrowed money from a friend, thinking it was a harmless favor, but that favor quickly became theft when she realized she couldn't repay it. The guilt crushed her, and when the police found out, the inevitable consequence rushed in to claim her. As she stared at the small window barred with metal, fragments of light flickered through, reminding her of the vibrant world outside. She felt like a caged bird, longing to spread her wings but trapped in an unforgiving cage. The silence in the room was deafening. Each tick of the clock felt like a countdown to an uncertain fate. Suddenly, the door creaked open. Deputy Lawson stepped in, a sturdy figure with years of experience etched into the lines of his face. "Hey, Emma," he said, his voice steady but warm. Emma nodded, her heart racing. She had already rehearsed a million ways to defend herself through tears and apologies, but now she felt the weight of all those words come crushing back. He asked, leaning casually against the wall, yet his gaze was piercing. She hesitated, looking down at the ground. I stole money," she managed to say, the shame washing over her like a wave. Deputy Lawson asked, his tone even but probing. The question struck her hard. It wasn't just about the money anymore. "I thought I was helping my mom," Emma mumbled, her voice trembling. He pushed gently. Stunned, Emma fell silent and the room closed around her. Finally, she looked into his eyes, wondering if he could see the turmoil within her. I was just so desperate, she confessed, her voice shaky. Desperation can make us act in ways we never thought possible, Deputy Lawson said knowingly. But in the end, it only complicates things further. I was afraid. Afraid of looking weak, she admitted, her throat dry. Handling it alone can sometimes feel like carrying the whole world on your shoulders, he said. But asking for help doesn't make you weak, it shows strength. She mulled over his words, but it just felt like there was no way out, Emma said, her emotions flooding her voice. Deputy Lawson suggested. Emma echoed, still entangled in despair. Your situation isn't forever, he said, voice full of conviction. What if you took this time to really reflect on who you are and who you want to be? You mentioned wanting to help others. She scoffed incredulously. Think of this as your moment to grow, your canvas to paint. What skills do you have? She pondered for a moment and hesitantly replied, I used to love painting. Then take that escape with you, he encouraged her, his tone softening. Use this time to rediscover what makes you you. Explore those feelings through your art. Emma looked down at her hands, recalling the feel of a paintbrush gliding across canvas, the colors swirling and blending together, the sense of freedom and expression. But self-doubt crept in like a shadow, whispering that she had lost that part of herself forever. She whispered, vulnerability cracking her facade. Every artist faces doubt, Deputy Lawson replied, but art is about exploration. With those words, a flicker of something ignited within Emma. Maybe this wasn't the end. Maybe it was a chance to reshape her reality, to transform her pain into something beautiful. But she would have to push through the suffocating fear that held her back. In the following days, Emma received a notebook and some pencils from the deputy. Each time he entered her cell, he asked her about her drawings and writings. With each question, she found herself slowly emerging from the clutches of despair. She began sketching her feelings, her fear, her guilt, her hope. One night, she drew a figure locked in chains on one side of the page and a bird soaring freely on the other. The contrast struck her as profound. That trapped figure represented her past, while the free bird embodied who she could become. Deputy Lawson saw the sketches and his eyes lit up. This is powerful, Emma, but it's not done, she said, her voice filled with doubt. The journey isn't meant to be perfect. It's about learning along the way, he assured her. Days turned into weeks, and each new piece of art represented a layer of healing. Emma learned to release her pent-up emotions through her sketches and writings. She poured out her soul onto the pages, creating a tapestry of her thoughts. One day, she completed a painting that depicted a stormy sky gradually giving way to a brilliant sunrise. The contrast in colors was striking. The dark blues and grays melted into bright yellows and oranges. It symbolized her struggle, but also her resilience, a journey moving from despair into hope. When she showed it to Deputy Lawson, his expression softened. This is incredible, Emma, she asked shyly, surprised at his enthusiasm. He said, his voice warm and encouraging. It feels good to express myself, she admitted, her confidence slowly building. Exactly, he said, nodding. Art is a reflection of your inner world. Their conversations pushed Emma to dig deeper, to confront her fears rather than run from them. Instead of viewing her time in jail as a punishment, she began to see it as an opportunity for self-discovery and renewal. But the day of her release approached, and anxiety took hold again. Emma wondered if she would fall back into her old patterns, if she would let her past define her once more. Deputy Lawson asked during one of their final meetings. I want to pursue art seriously, she said, determination shining through her voice. Then hold on to that dream, he advised. This isn't just a chapter, it's the beginning of your story. As the day of her release finally dawned, Emma felt a whirlwind of emotions. She stepped outside into the bright sunlight, the warmth enveloping her like a second chance. Thank you, Deputy Lawson, she said earnestly. Just remember that belief comes from within. Keep nurturing it, he replied, a proud smile tugging at his lips. As she walked away, Emma couldn't help but reflect on her journey, the mistakes that led her to those jailhouse walls and the lessons she learned within them. No longer burdened by guilt, she felt invigorated, ready to claim her life. She clutched her notebook to her chest, full of sketches that had been birthed from pain, anger, and ultimately hope. Emma vowed to keep creating, to delve into her art as a source of healing and change. And as she took those first steps into her new beginning, she knew that no matter what lay ahead, she was durable, resilient, and full of untapped potential. She was determined to rise from the ashes, ready to paint a brighter future, one filled with possibility, passion, and purpose. This was only the start of her story, and she was ready to write it herself. The cold concrete floor was unforgiving under Sarah's feet as she paced restlessly in her small cell. The sound of distant laughter and chatter echoed through the bars, a painful reminder of the freedom she once had. Just days before, she had been at a party, surrounded by friends, feeling invincible. Now, she felt like a ghost haunting the very shadows of her existence. It all started with a single, reckless decision. One moment of weakness that spiraled into chaos. Trying to impress her friends, Sarah had been careless. A few stolen moments, a few bad choices, and suddenly she was facing real consequences. The police had caught her, a stark realization that life could change in the blink of an eye. As she sat down on the hard bench, head in her hands, she replayed the events like a broken record. The thrill of the party, the clinking glasses, the laughter followed by the panic that gripped her when the police sirens wailed. How had she thought she could escape the consequences? The reality was brutal, the regret a heavy weight on her chest. Then came the sound of the heavy door creaking open. Deputy Miller walked in, his expression unreadable. He was a man of few words, but his eyes told a different story. They held a softness that was rare in a place like this. "Sarah," he said, his deep voice resonating in the small space. She nodded, her heart racing. What more could she say? She felt like the walls were closing in, longing for a shred of understanding, yet frightened of the truth. "Yeah," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Deputy Miller asked, his gaze steady as if he were trying to reach into her soul. "I messed up," she admitted, tears welling in her eyes. "I thought I could just borrow a little money just to help out a friend, but I ended up stealing it, and now..." Miller leaned against the wall, arms crossed. She looked down, shame washing over her like a tidal wave. "I felt like I had no choice. My friend was in trouble and I wanted to fix it," he prompted gently. "I didn't realize how messed up it was," she said, her voice cracking. "Desperation can make us do things we wouldn't normally consider," he replied. "But in helping your friend, you hurt yourself." His question hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Sarah felt herself unraveling, each thread revealing more of her pain. "I don't know, I guess. Everything feels so overwhelming. School, family, everything. That's what happens when we don't address our problems directly. We often seek shortcuts that lead us into deeper trouble," he said. Her heart sank a little lower. "And that solution blinded you," he said, nodding. "What if instead of running away, you faced these feelings?" Sarah blinked, taken aback by the notion. "It means confronting your fears head-on," he replied, his tone earnest. "It's about exploring who you are and what you really want." The thought rattled around in her mind, refusing to settle. "But how?" "Start by asking yourself what you want out of life, what brings you joy," he encouraged, his voice steady. "I used to paint," she murmured, recalling the forgotten joy of whipping colors across a canvas. "It was my escape." "There you go," he said, his expression brightening. "Then embrace that, let yourself paint your way through this." "But I can't just do that now, I'm locked up," she challenged, doubt creeping into her thoughts. "Being locked up doesn't mean you can't create," he countered. "Think of this space as a studio. Use what you have, even if it's just a pencil and paper. Draw out your feelings, sketch your dreams." With tentative fingers, Sarah wiped away a tear. "Absolutely," Deputy Miller encouraged. "When we create, we confront our feelings." An ember of hope ignited within her, fragile but persistent. Maybe she didn't have to live with the guilt forever. The thought of reclaiming a part of herself filled her with a flicker of excitement. She whispered, "Failure is part of every journey," he assured her, his gaze unwavering. "What matters is how you rise after each setback." Days passed, each one longer than the last, but with each visit from Deputy Miller, Sarah felt more encouraged. He brought her a small notebook and pencils, and she finally began to sketch again. It felt good to let out everything she had bottled up inside. Poured her emotions onto the page, capturing the fear, the regret, and the budding hope in vivid strokes. One night she sketched a tumultuous storm with dark, swirling clouds above, but just behind it was a break in the clouds with bright rays of sunlight bursting through. It was her life, caught between darkness and light. When Deputy Miller saw the drawing, he smiled warmly. "This is powerful. I'm not just giving up," she said defiantly. "Then let this be your anchor," he said, nodding at her sketch. With every sketch, Sarah started to release the burdens she had carried for so long. She found a sense of clarity in her art that she had never felt before. The isolation of her cell became less suffocating as her heart began to beat with possibility. Past, and with them came a sense of routine. During the quiet moments, she would slip into her sketches, losing herself in the world she created. Each line connected her more deeply to who she was. She realized she still had dreams, ones that were worth holding on to. One day, Deputy Miller entered, his expression unusually somber. "I wanted to check in on you," he said, looking concerned. "Things have been better," she replied, a hint of pride creeping into her voice. "I've started painting again." "Then you're on the right track," he said, leaning closer. "I want to go to art school. I want to help others find their voice through art, just like I've been doing for myself," she admitted, feeling the weight of her ambition surge. "That's fantastic," he replied, his face lighting up with enthusiasm. "You've taken this challenge and turned it into growth," she asked, fear creeping back in. "That's part of the journey," he said firmly. "Life is full of lessons." The release date drew nearer. Sarah felt a stir of anxiety mixed with anticipation. Would she be able to hold on to this clarity when she stepped back into the world filled with distractions and pressures? Or would the storm inside her return? "Emma, envision what you want your life to look like once you're out," Deputy Miller encouraged during one of their last conversations. "I want to create a community art project," she said, beaming. "Then go for it," he said, pride radiating from him. "This isn't just a moment, it's your chance to reshape your future." Finally, the day arrived. The heavy cell door swung open and Sarah stepped into the warm light of a new beginning. Sunshine flooded over her, washing away the remnants of doubt and fear. She breathed deeply, relishing the warmth of freedom. "Thank you for everything, Deputy Miller," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "Believe in yourself, Sarah. Our journeys don't have to define us, they can teach us." "Keep that fire alive and create your path," he replied, a knowing smile gracing his lips. As she walked away, Sarah realized that the road ahead was uncharted, but it was hers to explore. Empowered by her experiences, she clutched her precious notebook against her chest, filled with sketches and dreams. She knew she would face challenges, but armed with the lessons of her past, she felt ready to conquer whatever lay ahead. Life was a canvas, and she was ready to paint it with vibrant colors full of hope and passion. In that moment, Sarah understood that every end held the seed of a new beginning. She was more than her mistakes. She was a survivor, an artist, a voice waiting to be heard. And now, she was finally prepared to share her story with the world. The metallic clang of the jail cell door echoed through the dreary confines, a sound that marked the end of freedom for Emma. She stood frozen in the small, dimly lit room, the weight of her actions pressing heavily on her shoulders. Just days before, she had been laughing with friends, the weight of the world feeling effortlessly light. Now she could feel the shadows closing in around her. The fluorescent light flickered, harsh and unyielding, casting sharp angles into the corners of the cell. She looked around, taking in the sterile, unforgiving environment, metal bars, cold concrete, and a single small window that offered a glimpse of the sky but nothing more. Outside, life went on, but in here, time felt suspended, like the world had forgotten her. Emma had never imagined she would end up in this predicament. She had slipped into a web of desperation. A simple mistake spiraled into chaos. One late night, fueled by anxiety and peer pressure, she made a decision that would change her life forever. She stole money from her roommate, thinking it was a harmless loan. But when she was caught, the reality hit her like a punch to the gut. Now she faced the daunting coldness of a jail cell, alone with her thoughts. After what felt like hours of torment, the heavy door suddenly creaked open, breaking the silence. In walked Deputy Roberts, a solid man with a stern expression, but his eyes held a flicker of compassion. "Emma," he said, his voice firm but kind. Something about his demeanor made her feel safe. She nodded, fear and shame swirling in her stomach like a storm. "Sure," she said, almost too quietly. He asked, crossing his arms as he leaned against the wall. The weight of his question hung in the air, a challenge wrapped in curiosity. "I messed up," she admitted, the words tumbling out like loose stones. "I took money that didn't belong to me." He probed, his eyes locked on hers, searching for the truth beneath her surface. "My roommate, she was struggling. I thought if I could just help her out for a bit," Emma replied, her voice trembling. Deputy Roberts continued, unwavering. Emma's heart raced. She hadn't thought about it that way. "I was too scared to ask for help," she finally confessed, a wave of vulnerability washing over her. "Everything piled up: school, work, my family," he asked, leaning in just slightly. "And expectations," Emma said, her voice shaking. "Everyone relied on me. I thought I was strong enough to handle it, but I wasn't. That's a heavy burden to carry," he said, nodding slowly. "But running away from the issue only makes it worse," she echoed, confusion flickering in her eyes. "Think about it. You have time to reflect, time to understand yourself better." He paused, allowing her to absorb his words. "What do you want to achieve?" Emma swallowed hard, hope and fear battling inside her. "I just want to feel good about myself again. I used to love painting," he suggested. "Art can be a powerful tool for healing." The idea surprised her. Could she really find solace in a sketchbook while locked away? But it feels pointless. "Start small," he said, his eyes brightening. "Even a few sketches can help you discover your failings." "I don't know if I can," she mumbled, doubt creeping back in. "Every artist faces fear and uncertainty," he replied, "but each mistake is an opportunity to learn." His confidence ignited a flicker of determination inside her. She felt she could start taking control even in the sparsest of circumstances. "Okay," she said slowly, her voice gaining strength. As days turned into weeks, the size of her cell shrunk even more, but Emma found a new space within herself. Each time Deputy Roberts checked in, his presence offered her a sense of stability she desperately needed. He was not just a guard, he had become a mentor of sorts. Emma received a small notebook and a set of colored pencils from him during one of their conversations. "Use these," he encouraged, handing them over like treasures. That night she opened the notebook, its blank pages inviting her to spill out her thoughts. She took a deep breath and began to draw lines forming images that were both haunting and beautiful. At first it was shaky, she didn't quite know what to express. Suddenly shapes emerged, a figure locked in chains, lost in shadows. Beside it she drew a bright sun breaking through stormy clouds, a potent symbol of hope. With each stroke she felt lighter, as if she were releasing pieces of the burden she had been carrying. When she showed Deputy Roberts her first sketches, he was genuinely impressed. "This is incredible. You've captured your struggle and your hope," he said, enthusiasm punctuating his words. "I didn't think I could do this," Emma confessed, feeling a rush of pride. That's the essence of art. It helps us confront our truths," he encouraged. As she continued to create, she found that each drawing resonated more deeply than the last. Emma illustrated her fears, her regrets, and her dreams, each sketch a small piece of her unraveling story. The jail cell, once a prison, transformed into a sanctuary, a space for reflection and discovery. One evening, after completing a vibrant painting of a phoenix rising from the ashes, Emma felt a rush of exhilaration. "I think I'm starting to understand," she told him. "Exactly," Deputy Roberts replied, his eyes gleaming with pride. "This isn't just about surviving, it's about thriving." But as her release date drew closer, a storm brewed within her. Fear and doubt threatened to overshadow the progress she had made. What if she fell back into the patterns that had led her here? Deputy Roberts asked during one of their final conversations. "I want to go back to school. I want to help others through art," she said, conviction building in her voice. "Then let that vision guide you," he urged. Finally, the day arrived when Emma would step out of those jail walls. Her heart raced as she faced the heavy door. As it swung open, sunlight poured in, hitting her like a tidal wave. It carried warmth, hope, and a future she was now ready to embrace. Deputy Roberts looked at her, a proud smile on his face. "You've worked hard. Remember the lessons you've learned here." "Thank you for believing in me," she said, tears stinging her eyes. "Now go paint your world," he said, his tone urging her onward. As she stepped into the world that had continued without her, Emma took a deep breath, anchoring herself in the moment. Everything felt new, vibrant, electric. She felt the weight of her past, but it was no longer shackling. It was a part of her journey. With her notebook and sketches in hand, she walked into a new beginning where every step felt like a brushstroke on a canvas filled with potential. The colors of her life were about to collide, blending into something beautiful and extraordinary. And as Emma moved into the future, she knew that every setback was just an opportunity to rise again, just like the phoenix she had painted. This time she was determined to be the artist of her life, ready to take every challenge and transform it into something remarkable. Where once there was fear, now stood hope, ready to guide her as she painted her story anew. The cold clang of the cell door reverberated through the dim room, a finality that echoed like a death knell in Emma's ears. She sat on a hard bench, her heart racing as the reality of her situation settled in. Just days ago, she'd been on the outside, laughing with friends under a blanket of stars. Now here she was trapped, isolated and consumed by a crushing wave of regret. The sterile smell of the jailhouse hung in the air, and the relentless hum of fluorescent lights buzzed above her, creating an atmosphere that felt suffocating. Outside, life continued, but in here, time stood still. She gazed through the tiny barred window, catching glimpses of sunlight. It felt like a world torn away from her grasp. Emma had never imagined she would find herself in such a grim predicament. It all started with that fateful choice, a night spun from peer pressure and desperation. She had always been a good student, someone who tried to please everybody, but that night she let the pressure get to her. She'd taken money from her roommate, believing it was a harmless act that could right a friend's wrong, but now she felt like the very embodiment of her mistakes. The weight of guilt was unbearable as she thought of her family, her friends, the trust she shattered. Tears pricked the corners of her eyes, stinging like salt in an open wound. That's when the heavy door creaked open again. Deputy Lawson stepped in, a figure of authority yet with an unexpected gentleness in his demeanor. He had been the one to process her, the one who had seen her at her worst. "Emma," he said, his voice steady yet comforting. She nodded, her throat tight as if the words she wanted to say were stuck somewhere in the pit of her stomach. "Okay," she murmured. He asked, looking her directly in the eyes as if searching for a deeper truth. "I messed up," she said, her voice trembling. "I took money from my roommate," he pressed gently, not letting her evade the question. "I thought I could help her with her bills. She was struggling," Emma explained, the memories flooding back, but it spiraled out of control. Deputy Lawson considered her words carefully. A lump rose in her throat. "I felt trapped." "It sounds like you were drowning," he said, his tone softening. Emma looked away, a wave of shame washing over her. "I didn't know who to turn to," he asked, his gaze steady, forcing her to confront the reality she had been avoiding. "It eventually spills out," she admitted. "Exactly," he said, nodding slowly. "Your decision was driven by fear of failure, fear of judgment." She echoed, confusion flickering in her eyes. "It's an opportunity," he said, leaning closer. "You have the time to reflect, to understand yourself better. What do you want moving forward?" His words began to seep into her consciousness, challenging her to rethink everything. "I just want to feel good about myself again," she said softly. "I used to love to paint," he suggested, hope threading through his voice. "Let art be your means of expression," she questioned, her perspective changing. "Create whatever speaks to you," he replied. "Use this time to explore those feelings. Even if you're just using a pencil and paper, you can create something meaningful." With her heart racing, Emma considered the possibility. She whispered, the vulnerability creeping back in. "Every artist faces self-doubt," he reassured her. "In the act of creating, we encounter our truth. You're allowed to make mistakes, embrace them." As the days unfolded, Emma began to accept his challenge. Each visit from Deputy Lawson shed a new light on her insecurities, allowing her to peel back the layers of herself she had long buried. For the first time, she felt herself coming alive, not drowning. With each passing day, she filled her small notebook with sketches, pouring her emotions onto the pages, not as a form of escape, but as a necessity. The first drawing was shaky, lines uneven, but it depicted a figure trapped in dark, swirling shadows, a representation of her past self. Next to it, she drew a sun breaking through the clouds, symbolic of her hope for a brighter future. That contrast ignited something in her, a realization that she wasn't just stuck, she had the power to change. In one of her drawings, she captured the feeling of being pulled between despair and hope, the two sides of her existence clashing violently. Each line began to speak her truth. A few days later, Deputy Lawson entered her cell and paused at her drawings. "These are amazing, Emma," he said, genuine admiration in his eyes. "It feels good to let it out," she confessed, a deep sense of satisfaction bubbling within. "It's therapeutic, isn't it? Creating art allows you to confront those deeper issues that lie beneath the surface," he observed. "Yeah," she agreed, a flicker of pride igniting inside her. As her release date approached, Emma felt a whirlwind of emotions, anxiety swirling with excitement. Would she be able to hold on to this clarity once back in the chaos of the outside world? Would the shadows of her past come rushing back? "I want to go back to school," she said, determination blooming in her voice. "Then don't let this moment define you," he encouraged. "It's a stepping stone to something greater." When her release day finally arrived, Emma stood before the heavy door, her heart pounding. As it swung open, a rush of warmth flooded in, the sunlight breaking through like a beacon of hope. "Thank you for everything, Deputy Lawson," she murmured, her voice thick with gratitude. "Believe in yourself, Emma. Keep moving forward," he replied, a proud smile lighting his face. As she stepped into freedom, the world felt vivid and alive. Each breath tasted sweeter than the last, each moment brimming with potential. Emma took a deep breath, anchoring herself in the moment. With her sketches in hand, she walked into her future with a new perspective, no longer defined by her past, but ready to embrace who she was becoming. The storm inside her had calmed. She recognized that with every setback, there was an opportunity to rise again. Emma knew she had been given a second chance, not just to exist, but to thrive. She felt alive, ready to paint the canvas of her life with all the colors of her experiences. And this time, each stroke would be intentional, an expression of hope and resilience. She was ready to share her story, a new beginning unfurling before her. The world was hers for the taking, and she intended to seize it, one brushstroke at a time. The clang of metal echoed through the stark, concrete walls of the jailhouse, reverberating around Emma like the tolling of a bell marking her descent into uncertainty. She was alone in her small cell, every shadow around her a reminder of the choices that had led her to this moment. Just days before, she had been filled with dreams, laughing with friends during late-night outings, believing that the world was hers for the taking. Now she sat in silence, drowning in regret. A heavy feeling settled in her chest as she tried to make sense of everything that had spiraled out of control. All it took was one reckless decision one night of trying to impress her friends at a party, where a few bad choices quickly led to her downfall. Emma had thought she was just borrowing, taking money from her roommate for a few days, intending to pay it back once she could. But borrowing had turned into something much darker, and then the police were at her door, ready to take her away. She wrapped her arms around her knees, rocking slightly, trying to find comfort in the confinement. The room felt unusually cold, and the fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting an unsettling glow. Outside, she could hear laughter and the distant hum of life, a world she had lost sight of, a world she could no longer touch. The door swung open with a creak, and in stepped Deputy Miller. With a sturdy build and a demeanor that exuded authority, he had an aura that instantly commanded respect. Yet beneath his serious exterior, there was a flicker of kindness in his eyes, a glimmer of understanding. "Hey, Emma," he said slowly, as if choosing his words carefully. She hesitated, unsure if she could face another conversation that would only remind her of her failures, but something in his voice urged her to nod. He asked, leaning against the wall with a sincerity that made her look up. Emma's breath caught in her throat. "I messed up," she trembled, a wave of tears stinging her eyes. "I took money that didn't belong to me," he finished for her. "No," she said, her voice breaking. "I never meant to hurt anyone." He pressed gently, his gaze steady but probing. "I felt trapped," she said, raw emotion spilling from her lips. "Everything was piling up, my studies, my family's financial problems." "Desperation can blind us," he said softly, nodding in understanding. "But it also leads to choices that we might not normally make. You took a risk and it didn't pay off." "I was afraid of what people would think." Miller frowned, as if remembering his own struggles. "It's easy to get caught in that mindset, but running from our problems only makes the burden heavier," she echoed skeptically. "It's a moment to reflect," he asserted. "What do you want to achieve, both for yourself and your future?" Emma's heart raced at the prospect. "I just want to feel good about myself again," she admitted, the truth pouring forth. "I used to paint, it brought me joy," he suggested. "Let it guide you." "Art?" she questioned, doubt creeping in like a shadow. "Art doesn't require much, just a pencil and paper," he explained. "Begin with whatever you feel. Each line can release the weight you carry." Emma was silent, considering his words. The notion of expressing herself through art felt both thrilling and terrifying. She whispered. "Every artist has doubted themselves," Miller reassured her. "But every mark you make, every piece you create can lead you to understanding." The flicker of hope ignited within her. Maybe this was her chance to confront her pain head-on, not simply to exist in it. "Okay," she said, her voice stronger than before. As days passed and her cell became a temporary sanctuary, the small notebook Deputy Miller had given her became a refuge. With each visit, she felt the burden lighten bit by bit. She started sketching. Her first drawing was shaky, filled with raw emotion, a figure locked in chains, surrounded by swirling shadows. It represented her past, but also echoed her desire for freedom. Next to it, she drew a sun breaking through the clouds, symbolizing hope. When she finally showed Deputy Miller her sketches, he looked genuinely impressed. "These are incredible, Emma, everything I've been feeling," she admitted, surprised by the relief that came with sharing. "Art is a powerful tool," he said, leaning in as if the words were sacred. "It helps us confront our emotions." "It feels freeing," she replied, a smile breaking through. "I never thought I'd find this again." The days turned into weeks, and the patterns of her confinement began to blur. With each piece of art, Emma felt like she was peeling back the layers of herself, not just embracing her mistakes, but also welcoming growth. The world outside still echoed with laughter and life, but within those walls, she was discovering a different kind of freedom. In one of her pieces, she created a vast ocean filled with tumultuous waves, captured in the midst of a storm. But at the center of it all was an island bathed in sunlight, a place where she imagined herself escaping her troubles, a vibrant space filled with possibility. As Emma honed her craft, she became increasingly eager to share her voice with others. "I want to create something bigger," she confessed to Miller one day. "Now that's a beautiful vision," he said, beaming. "You're thinking beyond your own experience. You're ready to turn this journey into something meaningful for others." "I'm afraid," she admitted, vulnerability creeping back into her voice. "Remember this," he urged, his tone firm but gentle. "Change is a process. Every step you take counts, even the missteps. You've learned more about yourself and what makes you happy." Finally, the day of her release came. Emma stood before the heavy door, heart pounding as the metal creaked open. As she stepped outside, sunlight flooded over her, warm and vibrant, a stark contrast to the chilled air of her cell. "Thank you, Deputy Miller," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Just remember what you've discovered about yourself," he replied, a proud smile spreading across his face. "You created your path back to freedom." As Emma stepped into the world, the vibrant colors of life washed over her. But even as she felt the thrill of freedom, a nagging sense of uncertainty clung to her, a question that refused to leave her mind. Could she resist the temptations that had once led her astray? The days following her release were far from easy. Emma found herself standing in front of blank canvases, the thrill of opportunity mixed with the weight of expectation. Would she slip back into old habits? Could she truly make a difference for herself and others? One evening, while she stared at the canvas, a thought struck her, a moment of inspiration fueled by fear and hope alike. She could share her story through art, not only for herself, but to reach others going through similar struggles. It was with that idea that her next piece began to take form. Days turned into weeks, and Emma began organizing community workshops for local youth, using art as a tool for expression and healing. But just as her journey seemed to be heading in a positive direction, a familiar darkness began to creep back into her life, feelings of inadequacy, anxiety about failing again. Then one fateful afternoon, in the middle of a class, a familiar face appeared in the doorway. It was her roommate, the one she had stolen from. Emma's heart dropped, emotions flooding through her as she faced the person she had wronged. And there, in a place filled with paint and creativity, stood the weight of her past, waiting for a resolution that could change everything. "Emma," her roommate said, her voice steady but tinged with pain. As the walls seemed to close in around her once more, Emma's heart raced, caught between confrontation and the hope of redemption. This was the moment she had been both dreading and longing for. Would she crumble under the weight of her past, or could she stand tall, strong in the knowledge of who she was becoming? The outcome hung in the air like an unfinished brushstroke, and just like that, everything felt uncertain again. Emma took a deep breath, ready to face whatever came next. After all, what was life if not a canvas waiting to be painted?